The Georgia Bulldogs are set for the 2025 season, coming off of a 2024 year that just about everyone says was a down year, but they won the SEC. That's how good Kirby Smart has his Georgia Bulldogs, a team that had boasted a number of first-round picks and a lot of production that is headed to the National Football League. It's unfortunate that they're not going to have the likes of Mykel Williams, Jalen, the defensive side of the football, Smell, Munden, of course, Malaki Starks, and then offensively, we know what they lost in the sense of Carson Beck transferring to Miami, to a lot of Georgia fans just saying, yeah, you know what, whatever, Carson Beck, see ya, we didn't want you anyway. Let's get set for the start of the 2025 preview and predictions for Georgia next year, and their starting quarterback, Gunnar Stockton, takes the reins from the aforementioned Carson Beck. Week 1 against Marshall. Well, guess what? You don't have to face off against the leader in college football for sacks a year ago in Mike Green. That devastating pass rush for his is headed to the Baltimore Ravens and no longer with Marshall. Georgia looks to win this one 36-3, leaning on Nate Frazier early on in the season. I don't want to see Gunnar Stockton running the football 20 times from the get-go and him just putting his body on the line against Marshall and then Austin Peay, who they beat 41-7. These two matchups, like Austin Peay, see him air it out. Look at what you have in Zachariah Branch, because after this, you've got at Tennessee, at Neyland, and then Alabama. You need to know what you have in Zachariah. Dylan Bell, this team dropped so many passes last year. No one was helping out Carson. You can understand the frustration. Even at Georgia Tech, comeback 17-point miraculous 8 overtime win. There were still so many plays that Carson wanted back and guys did not make. Noah Thomas, to mention another wide receiver. There's Colby Young for them, a senior, right, the former transfer. Georgia needs to have production from its wide receivers. We know that Nate Frazier is going to be good. Week 3, as I said, they are at Tennessee. This is a team with Joey Aguilar now that is looking to lean on that crowd there at Neyland Stadium, and I don't say that lightly. That might just be a top 3 place to play in college football as far as it goes for the hardest to be. Some people say it's number 1. Haven't been there myself. I can't put it number 1, but I will just reserve it as a top 3 place in college football to play a game. One of the hardest. This year I've actually got Tennessee ranked at number 25. Not as high on them as a number of people. Really concerned about their defensive line, not having Omar Norman Lott in the middle there, not having James Pierce Jr. anymore on the edge. He ends up going to the Atlanta Falcons. Had to close that window. It is just getting a little bit loud out there. People having some fun. Also need to mention, I am recording this a couple of weeks before the start of when you are watching this. I am currently, when you're watching it, in Tanzania to go check out the Great Migration in Africa, also traveling to Kenya. So if I'm bringing up any guys that might be hurt or won't be factors, like what's going on of what he's talking about, it is because I am making this a couple weeks before any of that stuff actually happens. And I lost to Tennessee, and Coach Heupel puts them at 2-1 on the year. The bye week hits, and a 2-1 Georgia hosting Alabama. This is the first time they've hosted Alabama in 10 years. The Crimson Tide, of course, don't have Nick Saban anymore, but that change of head coach didn't matter last year when they went into Bryant-Denny Stadium and now what's called Saban Field. Ryan Williams goes off for 1 billion yards and the huge touchdown at the end of that game. The defense is going crazy. Jalen Milrose finding wide receivers all across the board, and the defense can't get any stops. And then Georgia leans on Mykel and Jalen. They're able to get the stops that they need later on in the game. Carson Beck goes off in the second half. Everything is clicking, but it's just not enough to stop Bama. See them dropping this game to Bama. Of course, Ryan Williams is probably the second best wide receiver in college football, knowing where he is at all times. So for that Georgia secondary that is a lot more inexperienced than they have been previously, Keely Ringo no longer there. We know that they don't have Malaki Starks in the back end anymore. So KJ Bolden, Ja'Cory Thomas, Daniel Harris, CJ Allen up a little bit in those positions where they need to be able to cover the talent on that Bama side. they will have important roles for that. But have them dropping it 26-20. Ty Simpson coming up with a big win at Sanford Stadium. So Georgia at this point is 2-2 on the year. If you thought the talk was negative last year, at this point it's going to be far more so. Kentucky comes to town. They will just beat them at 32-14. I believe this will be an easier matchup. For example, Maxwell Hairston is no longer there. Deion Walker in the middle of that defense, 350 pounds. You're going to be able to get Nate Frazier going in the middle. 3-2 getting back in the win column before they hit the road to play at Auburn. Auburn's got a different level of explosiveness now that they have Eric Singleton. Bama fans, Georgia fans, you remember that game against Georgia Tech. Eric Singleton was a nightmare to cover for Haynes King and the Yellow Jackets. Well, he's at Auburn now, 29-13. Do believe that the Dogs are able to contain that offense. The following week, you're at home against Ole Miss. I've got Ole Miss as the number 10 team in the country, returning the likes of not that much on both sides of the ball. They lose Jackson Dart. They lose Princely Uman-Mielen, Jared Ivey on the defensive front of what was one of the best defensive fronts, Walter Nolan, who ends up being a first-round pick to the Arizona Cardinals. Instead, they go out and get Princely's younger brother, Princewell, one of the most coveted transfers in college football in the offseason in that portal window. And Ole Miss is ready to roll with Suntarine Perkins, who had double-digit sacks a year ago, stopping Austin Simmons. Believe they can. 24-17. Georgia improves to 5-2 after they were 2-2, getting a big couple of SEC and conference victories. Before that bye week, before a game against Florida in Jacksonville, this one to be a neutral site. Jacksonville, the world's largest cocktail party, 30-20. Bama, Georgia, Texas are supposed to be the top three teams. You should beat anyone that's not in those if you are Georgia next year, right? If you're not playing Bama or Texas, pretty much you should have those wins. Like, that's why a loss to Tennessee, I think many people would find surprising. Have them beating DJ Lagway and company 30-20. Really the biggest guy on defense that I pick out for them is Caleb Banks. As by the middle of the season when this matchup comes along and I can preview it before it's closer, be able to do that. But as of now, they look to be a decent group under Billy Napier, and that team is flying high. Had them ranked as 15 in the country, and a 30-20 win for Georgia before they play, in my opinion, the weakest team in the Southeast Conference at Mississippi State. A win 41-12, and the record continues to improve. Get to 7-2 on the season before a home game against Texas. Now, you play Alabama at home, you play Texas at home. You can't get it any better way if you are a season ticket holder. Holy cow, like, you get these matchups coming to town. Like, that is crazy. Texas 23-20. They beat Arch Manning and company. The main thing they have to do is find a way to run the football. That's easier said than done against Colin Simmons, the Sean Alexander Freshman of the Year award winner. Yes, he won the award, not Jeremiah Smith for Ohio State, but Colin Simmons won Freshman of the Year. Anthony Hill Jr., who is likely a top 10 pick in next year's draft. Malik Muhammad, a top 5 corner. Michael Taft returned for another season after Texas lost in another college football playoff semifinal game. Have them winning 23-20 because they can establish the run with Nate Frazier, find a way to do it and make it easier on Gunnar Stockton. Last year, a lot of people were feeling like if Arch Manning played against Georgia, they could have won that second game. Mykel Williams and Jalen Walker just dominating, destroying that front of Cameron Williams and Kelvin Banks up there. Like, they had such an impact. Obviously, it's not going to be that level next year with a number of newer faces. There are a few guys that return, but like Tate Ratledge, for example, he's a guy that you just miss. That's just a hard-nosed dude that was even able to talk and try and bring Carson back into games and keep his head in that thing. A game against Charlotte, we all know that teams in the SEC square off against some of these cupcakes, so to say. That's just the way it goes. It's so nice to have that before you get into rivalry week or really huge matchups at the end of the season. Their huge matchup at the end of the year. Believe that the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets will be a college football playoff contender and will beat the Georgia Bulldogs at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We know this year is a little bit different. Last year, it was played at Sanford Stadium, and it was an 8th overtime game. Haynes King showed the world that he is a warrior, as Kirby Smart called it. That's a perfect way to describe it. He came back from a shoulder injury, participated in that game. This team had beaten Miami, all but ended their hopes once Miami, they lost, still had a shot to make the playoff and get a home game at Hard Rock Stadium in the first round, but then they lost to Syracuse and Kyle McCord. But a loss to Georgia Tech, 27-31. Solely, I've got it as this, as Georgia had more of the roster. They had the talent advantage over Georgia Tech, and still it was that close at home. Put them on a neutral site, and the veteran ability of Haynes King, of Haynes in the backfield, who had a terrific game against Georgia. You remember Haynes, the two Hayneses to that Georgia Tech offense, and their coach Brent Key looking to give him a huge win overall on the year. That drops Georgia to 9-3 and missing the SEC championship game. Of course, that would be the step down. That is truly a step down from grace, making the quarterfinals and getting a first round bye, winning the SEC. Can't quite call it a step down. Understand that the play wasn't to the same level, but expect this to happen. Carson Beck could be a top 5 quarterback next year. The fact that he's playing somewhere else and you don't have the veteran of what he would be year 3 in that Georgia locker room now to be a leader. You can go either way, but still, I think it hurts you overall in your passing attack. Really excited for Georgia this year, of course. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Dogs, whether I'm really selling them too short and what they can be next year, or I've got them just right and you agree with that they likely could miss the SEC champ game. First year with Gunnar Stockton under center and trying to establish themselves as a defense. It would be very tough. I'd be incredibly impressed if they just brought in a bunch of these new guys and they made a huge impact right away and they were back to their former self as a top 3, one of the best defenses every year in college football. Let me know with all of that. Make sure to subscribe for more content in the future. We're fired up for college football next year. Don't want you to miss any of it. Would just love to have you join this community and stay tuned for that content coming out soon. And of course, have a great rest of your day unless you check out more videos. And I will see you next time. Thank you.
Best player in college football.
That Georgia and Ohio State game, New Year's Eve, is going to be a classic.
Josh Blunder, hi everybody, I'm Josh Blunder.
To the 40, 35, 30, Espinosa to the 20.